Thursday, June 13th, 2019, and we are calling to order the Public Health Hospital District Number 4 Peak County Board of Commissioners meeting. Would you please join me for the flag salute?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do I, roll call?
President Norris?
Here.
Vice President Aaron?
Here.
Secretary Spikers?
Here.
Commissioner Pollard?
Here.
Commissioner Carter?
Here. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I make a motion that we approve the agenda.
I second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll go to vote. All those in favor of the agenda say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Communications. I'm going to be the first one to talk tonight. I owe Emma an apology. The way we ran our last meeting was not very good, and that really falls on me as the board chair. Emma tried to make a motion. I asked her to wait. Commissioner Pollard was standing. I addressed him before I addressed her. David started out. We do not run good meetings. We all have a lot to say, and we're not courteous the way we should be. And if we could just apply two things, and I think council is going to help us with this, is first, whoever the chair is, to address the chair for speaking. And two, if you think something's not going right, point of order. If we can use those two things, addressing the chair and using point of order, we would do a whole lot better. And I apologize, Emma. I really messed up.
I did accept it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Dr. Woodcock.
We have
Next.
a brief report that's in your folder, and it's just bullet points, so I'll talk more than was actually written for you. So 2 weeks ago, June 4th and 5th, we completed our biennial charge master review. And this is a time when we bring our consultant in and we look at the revenue cycle in an entirely unique way, a different way than we do on a month-to-month basis. So it's looking at any changes that have happened in the billing regulations world, making sure that we've reflected all of those regulatory changes in our charge master. That's the resource that we use in order to generate our charges from. That's what the charge master is. We look at, we kind of audit things from a 10,000 foot level, and auditing to make sure that we're capturing everything, that there's not charges that are being missed and overlooked, and that they're being applied in the right way. And then crosswalking all of that information over onto our cost report, because the cost report is so crucial in critical access hospital environment. So again, we look forward to him coming every couple of years, and he always walks away. And we have a long list of things to tidy, and it would be not worth the cost if he came and found nothing. But we've got things to do. But he walks away regularly saying he looks forward to coming with us because he doesn't find disasters. He finds things that are in good order, different than he finds in other facilities, and so he really finds pleasure in the time, and we learn a lot, so that's great. Karen Denton, as I told you, is coming on board, and so she'll be joining us on Monday, June 17th, just a couple weeks before Steve transitions into his halftime FTE. Let's see if we can allow him to actually accomplish that. Protect him from himself. In here, so she'll be coming on board.
Halftime
No, I started in July.
Okay.
So, and then the next issue is the sleep medicine services. So we've been talking about that. The launch is slightly delayed until the middle of June, which I say delayed because we had moved it up sooner, but now it's returned back to the original mid-July, and that's only because there were some vacations of some key members, and we just felt like if we're going to launch it, let's launch it when everybody is finished with those vacation times. So that's all that has to do with, but everything's falling into place, and the work plans are being slowly concluded there. In May, we concluded May with our volume from our budgets being high, both on the inpatient and the emergency department. Since May concluded, though, our inpatient census has been a little on the low side, but we do have 14 patients in queue right now. They're just waiting for readiness of transfer, so still looking for a strong June as the month goes on. ED has remained strong, so it's good to be able to report. And then 2 weeks from now, on June 25th, we have a significant computer infrastructure upgrade that's getting planned. So all of the infrastructure that our systems sit on, we have milked them to the very end of their serviceable life. And so it is now time, they're reaching the end of their support life, and so we're going to transition now to the newer versions, and once again, milk every dollar out of those until the end of their life. And so that's a one-day project. It is a huge project. Our team's been working on it for months now, preparing, doing readiness, backup plans, testing it, trying to break it, is how we say it, trying to break it, and hope they're disappointed if they're unable to break it because they want to be able to restore it. And so they've gone through all of those exercises. So that transition occurs on the 25th. We participated with a regional multi-hospital, disaster preparedness exercise. We did this last week, and this was a scenario. The scenario was a bomb threat at one of the local hospitals that had reached legitimate thresholds, and their hospital needed to be rapidly evacuated. And so their exercise was how do you rapidly evacuate. Our exercise was how do we rapidly receive. So how do we very quickly be able to assess what our capabilities are, what our capacity is, communicate that back, and prepare what we need to do the receiving. As part of that is creating space for those who are higher acuity care. So those are always good exercises. It happened a few days before we actually had our own bury the miniature event here, in that there was a propane leakage that occurred in the work site next door. And so we had an opportunity to deploy kind of our responses and our resources to that, and be able to be a participant but a close observer to how well the team that responded to that. So we had the local fire department, the utilities, the city, very quickly on site had a plan in place. We were completely protected. We had no evacuations. We had nothing of that sort. But it was just a great opportunity for everybody in the organization to just go through that thought exercise, and some of it was a physical walking exercise. How to respond, and within hours, and we were completely prepared. We had our gas turned off, and our gas was restored. So the kitchen was the only one who suffered there. We don't, but because of the leak, they shut all gas off.
Oh, okay. First a fire, now a propane.
Yeah, we got all kinds of excitement.
They come in threes.
Oh, good.
Great.
We don't look forward to
Thank
that.
goodness none of them have been really all that dramatic in the end.
Yeah.
And then just the one final thing, the Chelan conference that's coming up on the 24th and the 26th. I don't know if you've all had a chance to look at the agenda, but it's a very rich agenda this year. So I think that we'll likely have quite a few conversations that come home with us that we'll continue on here. And especially around some of the recent legislative session. There are quite a few changes, and as you look at the agenda, there's a lot of legislative updates, changes in preparing to absorb some of those things. There will also be a global payment model that will be discussed. It's being right now proposed by CMS for the Medicaid payments, and it will be released very soon for some additional comments. But we've, at a state level, had a fair amount of insight into that proposal, so there will be conversations there. And we'll, as we learn more and more about that, we'll continue to talk about it so we understand how it will impact us.
Thank you, Dr. Michelle. Does anybody have any questions of Dr. Pickoff?
Madam Chair, I see that our CFO, Steve Daniel, will transition to OSFE in 30th. Karen Denton starts at her new role. Will she be taking some of the work of our CFO as well? Okay.
The non-CFO, non-traditional CFO will supervise.
Okay.
Yes, Steve will continue to have all things finance and
Yes.
the things that he oversees now that are non-direct finance. Those are the things that she'll transition to. And and then some things from me as well.
Thank you. Council, would you like to address the board?
Absolutely. Madam President, members, to provide to you this evening's topic, this is called obtaining and signing the floor, which is following your comments, Madam President. I think you'll find these most appropriate. And I will also just point out, mostly for Commissioner Carter's benefit, that the author of Robert's Rules, General Henry N. Robert, to some degree disrespects women because he uses the pronoun he and his rather than her throughout this. And that is not intentional. You have to remember that this was written in 1876. He died in 1923, so I'm sure he's turning over his grave every time we question whether he never used the words pronoun she. He does, in this document here that I'm going to talk about tonight, use the word Madam Chairman, which is unusual for him, so I like that. So let me begin this by telling you that before a member in an assembly, which means your group tonight, can make a motion or speak in debate. So two opportunities. One is if you want to make a motion. The second, you want to speak in debate or speak to the motion. The parliamentary name given to any form of discussion of the merits of the motion, he must obtain the floor. That is, he must be recognized by the chair as having the exclusive right to be heard at that time. So you have to get the floor. You have to get the chair's attention. Well, how do you do that? According to Robert's Rules, it says to claim the floor, a member rises at his place when no one else has the floor, or goes to a microphone in a large hall, faces the chair and says, Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, or Madam Chairman, or whatever the chair's proper title. Note the asterisk. The asterisk at the bottom of the page says, in small boards and committees, members generally need not rise to obtain the floor. That is the informality of your group. You're not rising, you're not going to the microphone. You typically need to get the attention, though, and you can do that by waving a hand or a nod. We'll talk about the head nod according to Mr. Robert's Rules here in a second. If the member is entitled to the floor at the time, the chair recognizes him, normally by announcing as applicable the person's name or title or the place or unit he represents. This member then has the floor and can remain standing or speak in debate or make a motion as permitted, then recognized. If only one person is seeking the floor in a small meeting where all present know and can see one another, the chair can recognize the member by merely nodding to him. And that can happen. Sometimes that can create some miscommunication. Maybe two members think that the chair is nodding at him or her. So nodding isn't always the best approach, but it is permissible. So then you would have the formal and other prearranged approach. The chair recognizes Mr. Smith. When the names of the members are not generally known, you can address the floor, you can talk about delegates. So last paragraph on that page. If two or more rise at the same time, the general rule is that all other things being equal, the member who arose and addressed the chair first after the floor was yielded is entitled to be recognized. A member cannot establish a prior claim of the floor by rising before it's been yielded, meaning you have to wait for the other motion of the other person to be completed before that floor is yielded. In principle, it's out of order to rise or be standing while another person has the floor, except for the purpose of making one of the motions outlined. That would be a point of order. And then go on to the second page. This is not the request to be recognized for terms of a motion, but in the debate. So in a debate, there are three important cases where the floor should be assigned. If a member who made the motion claims the floor and has not already spoken, they're entitled to be recognized in preference to other members so they can speak to their motion first. No one is entitled to the floor a second time in debate on the same motion on the same day, as long as other members haven't had the opportunity to speak. So you don't get to speak twice to your motion until others have had the opportunity. And thirdly, in cases where the chair knows the person seeking the floor have opposite opinions, then they should alternate, as far as possible, between those favoring those opposed. And finally, this second to last paragraph, a member cannot rise for the purpose of claiming preference and being recognized, as this is called above, after the chair recognizes another member. If at any time the chair makes a mistake, that doesn't happen very often with Madam President, but if it was to occur, and assigns the floor to the wrong person, when preference and recognition was timely claimed, or in any other case, his attention can be called to it by raising a point of order, and he should immediately correct the error. So, If you want to know about the point of order and how that works, you'll have to come back next month. That will be your presentation.
Do we, I guess we don't have any questions then for council, if we have to wait till next week.
Well, you can have questions, of course, but I'm just going to cover the point of order, the fact that I already have it prepared. I just didn't want to give you too much.
Are there any questions based on,
One thing that's been a bit confusing is this rule about Noah's entitled to the floor a second time in the day on the same motion on the same day, as long as any other member who has not spoken on the motion desires the floor. The question comes in when no other person wants to speak.
Yeah, that's covered, until they've had the opportunity, basically.
The opportunity is the key word.
Correct.
But, there may need to be discussion, but if others are, let's say, not interested, then the person that is interested should be able to speak again as long as it's germane.
They can speak again if no other members wanted to take the opportunity, or they've all been given the opportunity to speak, then you ask the chair, I'd like to speak further, because there's no other, speakers that want to address it.
Yeah, and that could mean that one person could speak 2 or 3 times.
Well, we do have limits in your rules of procedure as to how long you can speak and address motions.
Well, in the rules of procedure, it says that informal bodies speak 10 minutes, and we never got to that
That's in
point.
the rules of procedure. You don't have that. That's in Robert's rules where you can speak as long as you want. But you have rules of procedures that you've adopted, which allows the president to allow you to go beyond that by preference or by vote.
Okay, thank you.
how many, in our procedures? 3 minutes? 3 minutes, okay, so everybody knows, so 3 minutes is what our allowed is.
The rules of procedure provide for 3 minutes to speak on each motion, but again, the president can allow for additional time for the membership
Yes,
to vote on.
yes, that's our rule. Okay. Any other questions? Hearing none, we will move on. Do I have a move for a consent agenda?
I move.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
What does the consent agenda consist of?
The approval of minutes, May 9th, May 29th, decisions credentialing. That's what we do. That's those 3 things, those 2 things, actually. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so it passes. All right, moving next on to new business, presentation by Moss Adams.
I'd like to introduce Matt Stoker from Moss Adams. Moss Adams, as you know, is a CPA firm that Moss Adams does the audit. They work with staff, they work for you. And this is their presentation of the audit of 2018 financial. Matt, take it away.
Thank you, Matt.
Slides went away.
Yeah, I just couldn't see.
Oh, maybe.
Do we need dim the lights down that way? There we go.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. I think they want us to dim the lights. Well, I'll get started. So I'm presenting on the results of the 2018 financial statement audit, and it looks like everyone has a binder package that was issued in connection with that financial statement audit. Within there, you'll have the 2018 audited financial statements, a required communication to those charged with governance, and as well as a copy of the slide deck that we'll be going through. And the focus of the presentation today, I'll be covering the slides, but we have the other deliverables peruse through. So the first thing we'll cover is required communications. And this slide, slide 3 in the slide deck, is probably the most important slide for the district. And it's the fact that you received an unmodified opinion on the audited financial statements. And that is a clean opinion in layman terms. And that opinion was issued on May 22nd, 2019, and it stated that those financial statements were issued in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. That letter that I was alluding to is basically summarized in this one slide here. So we have a 4-page boilerplate letter that's issued in connection with financial statement audit. But here's really the key points within that letter. There were no issues discussed prior to our retention as auditors. No disagreements were noted with management. We didn't have anything we would consider a corrected or uncorrected adjustment going through our audit process. And then finally, we did not have any internal control deficiencies. So the terminology you might hear within an audit firm is a significant deficiency or material weakness, and none of those, no items we found rose to that level as part of our audit procedures. The other thing that was covered with the Finance Committee on May 28th that I won't be jumping into too much detail on today is there's a new accounting standard that's going to be effective in the 2020 financial statements, and it has to deal with leases. And I don't know how many of you are following up on the FASB side of things, but they have a lease standard on that side as well. And the summary here is that there used to be something called operating lease, and then in 2020, that goes away. Everything's going to be what's kind of called a capital lease now. Basically what's happening is everything's going on the balance sheet. Before, you used to be able to play with numbers a little bit. You could just report stuff on the income statement. But now, starting in 2020, regardless of your basis of accounting, you're going to have that future asset and future liability on your balance sheet. That's the main takeaway from this slide. So with that, we'll go into some financial statement trends. And this first slide here is just a global picture of your balance sheet, your total assets and deferred outflows of resources, and your total liabilities. And the information on the left is 2014, and then you work your way all the way to the right, which is your 2018 information. And I think the main thing that I'll be repeating in a lot of these slides is that 2017 and 2018 were very similar as far as activity and where everything was sitting at the end of the year. And that's what we'll kind of jump into here is on the asset and deferred outflow side. So this is just the one side of the balance sheet. You can see, and it's the same orientation on this slide. So you have the 2014 information on the leftmost of each cluster. So you have your cash and investments, and then the information in green or the dark bar is your 2018 information. So you can see that number, your patient account receivable number, and your other number are basically flat compared to the prior year. One change to note is your capital assets have been decreasing since 2015, and that's just depreciation on those assets. You have to recognize, you give your assets a life at the beginning, so you have this big, nice building that you put into service 2015, well, every year it's a little bit less valuable under government accounting standard rules. So it's not that you're disposing of anything necessarily, it's just a depreciation on those assets. On the other side of the balance sheet, you have your liabilities and net position. So here, similar story, your accounts payable and other very consistent with prior years. Your debt is slowly starting to come down. You're starting to make some payments on those 2015 bonds, and so you'll see that number continue to go down. And then your net position. So at the end of 2018, you had a net deficit of $20.4 million. We also have some ratios that we're going to cover going through the presentation. And the first one we have is your days cash and investments. And this is a rough calculation that's done as of a point in time. So on the slide again, you'll have the 2014 to 2018 information for the district on the left. And then on the right, we were able to obtain critical access hospital data that's publicly available. And that's from 2017. You can see how the district stacks up against the Washington critical access hospitals and then also critical access hospitals in the United States. So this first calculation we have here is days cash and investments. And what this calculation is roughly saying is as of December 31st, 2018, you could have operated the district as is for 196 days before you ran out of cash. And this is the assumption that you don't have any cash coming in the door after December 31st, 2018. You can see how you compare against the other two categories and with prior years as well. Net days, or gross revenue and accounts receivable. So this there's a ratio that we don't always look at, but per direction of the CFO, we're showing you the gross receivable and accounts receivable, gross revenue and accounts receivable. And I think it's more of just an apples to apples comparison with the critical access hospitals for the US and in Washington State. You can see that, 2018, that number was 57 versus 56 for the rest of the state. What this calculation is roughly saying is, how many days of service have we provided to our patients that we haven't collected yet? How many days have we not converted into cash yet as of December 31st? And that answer is 57, 2018. Now we're getting to the income statement side of the financial statements. And just like we did for the balance sheet, this is just a big global picture. You can see how your revenues and expenses were stacking up from 2014 to 2018. And starting in 2017, your revenue bar was higher than your expense bar, and that's obviously a good thing. And I wanted to point that out. Things have been trending in the right direction recently. The other thing, the next slide, slide 14, goes over the ratios as a percentage of operating revenue. So we have our different categories. We have wages and benefits, professional fees, supplies, purchase services. Similar story to what we saw on the balance sheet side. Kind of once we got to 2015 when the new facility was put in place, percentages of expenses as a percentage of revenue have been fairly flat. We have a couple other categories, including depreciation, other, and then total. In total, if you have a percentage that's less than 100, that means that you're having more revenues than expenses, which again is a good thing. The two clusters on the right of that slide, operating margin and change in net position. So operating margin is just operations, obviously, and that's a positive 4.7% in 2018, and then change in net position is a negative 1.9%. The difference between operating and change in net position is essentially it's your interest expense and then the tax levy, the tax funds received. And so you had more interest expense than you received tax during the year, tax revenue. Speaking of tax revenue, one of the other slides we like to highlight is this is actually the 2018 tax levy rates, and the district was at just over 40 cents. It was 41.51 cents, and you can see you're kind of towards the lower end of the levy on the cents per thousand of assessed value. And we actually cut off the chart on the left side of the slide. I mean, some of those special districts go all the way up to $8.
Are these all critical access hospital districts?
These I believe were all, I think they're all government entities, but I think most of them in here are district hospitals as well.
You get to the lower end, provide mostly.
The next couple slides will be covering covenant information. So this is critical to the bondholders and the district that they're meeting these thresholds that were set back in 2015. So the income available for debt service needs to be at 4.4 million every year going forward. In 2018, it was at 5.7 million, so a fairly comfortable cushion there. On this next slide, this would be slide 18. We have the other ratio comparisons. Just a summary where you can see how you're stacking up against the state and the rest of the country. I think the items to note here are total margin. The reason they have, this is a speculation, we didn't obviously audit every single district throughout the country, but the total margin, they probably have larger investment portfolios. What you see is when you go from a lower number from operating margin to higher number of total margin, you have a different blend of your investment portfolio, whereas the district here is basically just in LGIP investments, and it's a relatively safe investment, but therefore when the stock market's doing really well, you don't get the same benefit as maybe some of these other organizations receive. The other items to note were the age of plant. So your average piece of equipment at the facility is about 4.8 years old versus 11 plus for the average of the rest of the district hospitals. And because of that, your debt to capitalization number is going to be a little bit higher. You made a choice to take out this debt to build a new facility, so one number looks really good and the other number looks a little bit different compared to the state and the rest of the country. And then obviously, you're well aware that your outpatient total revenue is not the same as your average district hospital, and that kind of points out to it. It's not 100% apples to apples comparison, but it's the best that we could do for providing comparative information in these slides. We do have some industry observations as well. This is the part of the slide deck that Eric usually covers when we do these presentations, but I think the gist of it is hospitals are making money on not being a hospital in some sense. So your operating margin the last 10 years has been right around 2 to 2.5%, but their net margin, their excess margin, is more in that 5 to 6% range. So they're making more money on their cash that they're holding than they are running a hospital. And then in the bottom right hand corner of each of these slides, you'll see the 2017 critical access numbers as well that you can compare to the national trends. And this information comes from the most recently available Moody's medians report. So these are large rated hospital systems throughout the United States. See a similar trend with your days cash and receivables. Receivables have been flat the last 10 years, but these large hospital systems are holding on to their money because they're uncertain of what's going to happen in the future. And what you'll see later is they also haven't been reinvesting in their facilities.
I got a question about the accounts receivable.
Yep.
My understanding is that some hospitals, and I was going to ask Steve this, but some of the accounts are really in arrears, really late. And if you reissue, does that bring the days accounts receivable back to zero and therefore affect the actually AR?
It shouldn't, and they probably talk about
Yeah, it's based on date of discharge is how we would
Yeah.
look at it, the
So-
receivable date.
No, it doesn't. It's basically either cycle bill, which we have to swing that or date of discharge. So if we started doing that, that clean letter, you might have something in it.
Yeah, I might read it a little bit differently. The other thing I'll point out too, I think is a good point. So you did mention there might be some old moldy accounts that there's a very low likelihood of collection. This number is net AR days, so this is after applying allowances and bad debt reserves. So this is what the facilities think they're going to collect. It's been hovering around that 50-day number. Age of plant and debt to capitalization, seeing the same story being told in a different way. I mean, the facilities are getting older throughout the country, and organizations aren't taking out the debt to replace those facilities. Debt to cash flow and cash to debt. So these ratios are saying essentially how quickly can our operations pay off our debt, and then what's our capacity to take on new debt. And relatively flat, there's a little bit of a dip in, from 2013 to 2015, facilities started operating their hospitals a little more efficiently, and some of that debt was going down. And I think what's starting to happen again is these organizations are starting to see that the interest rate market's trending upward, so they're less likely to take out that debt. They're focused on paying off what they have outstanding. And that is the slide presentation. Let me know if you have any questions, and then also if you want to take this time to thank the management for their help throughout the audit process. I know Steve and his team do a great job giving us what we need to get through the financial statement audit, and we appreciate our business relationship with the district.
I got one question. So could you explain or tell the board in one sentence or two, was there any issues with the audit? And if there were, could you explain a little bit about that? Because when I looked through this the first time, where's the bottom line here? Could you explain that maybe a little bit better detail to the board so that they might have better understanding?
Yeah, so there were no, so if we're just talking from a pure audit perspective, there were no issues with performing the audit. To give the board some background, we started our financial statement audit in late April, and we're able to issue these financial statements in late May, and that's a very quick turnaround. And in order to be able to get through an audit process in about a 1 month time frame, things have to be ready and they have to be correct when we receive them. And that's kind of what we had going through the audit process. Is that what you were asking? Or
Yeah, I wanted to make sure, assure the rest of the board members that we don't have any issues in the audit.
Yeah.
One, and it's even more complex than the state auditor, right?
Yes.
We have a much more.
Yeah, we'll say
complex-
different, we don't want to put anyone down, but yeah, there's a materiality in what we do because there's such a large volume of transactions that we look at in the financial statement audit
Mhm.
that we're not going to every, let's say like every cash counter at the facility, making sure that the cash count is done
Right.
appropriately. We're looking big picture, you know.
Right.
We're spending our time on the significant risk, or is that receivable really collectible? We have to do procedures to make sure that that's appropriate.
Whereas the state auditor focuses on one small item.
Yeah.
And then it looks back, you know,
Yeah.
a couple of years on
Yeah.
it and decides whether there's any odd things. And they usually look at like cash, actual cash, you know, where did our cash go, you know, was petty cash or whatever. I think this last time we had our little store here audited, right?
Yeah, it was how they were handling the cash transactions in
procedures.
the gift shop and cafeterias. They get down to a very small level.
Yeah.
So their audits are determined by the Washington State RCW, so they're very strict on what they can and can't do as part of their procedures. From our perspective, we would probably never specifically audit the gift store, just because even if that thing was totally wrong for the year, the odds of that being a material misstatement within the financial statements is extremely low.
And so the state auditor does look at your audit.
Correct, yeah. Yeah, they review our reports.
Does anybody else have any questions? Commissioner Pollard?
What is our debt to asset ratio, and how does that ratio compare with us, compared with other similar situated hospitals, that is, critical access hospitals?
It's not a perfect calculation, but the debt to capitalization is essentially trying to summarize that type of
Yeah, I
ratio.
saw that, but there is such a thing. and
There
standard-
is.
Standard in the industry, it's a debt to asset ratio.
Yeah, so we would look at, and it's one of the early slides in the balance sheet where you're looking at the total assets versus the total liabilities. So the district has more liabilities than assets, which is, it's unique, but it's not unheard of. And so as a result, you would have net assets if there was more assets than liabilities, but in the district's case, you have a net deficit because you have more liabilities than assets. I would say that's a little unusual, but again, not completely unheard of for a district hospital.
It'd be really interesting to compare that with other critical access hospitals or hospitals.
Yeah, well, my sense is, based on the ones that I work on, is that the assets are almost always greater than the liabilities, but there are a couple of exceptions.
We're one of the exceptions.
Correct.
Do other commissioners have any questions?
Really, I didn't have the opportunity to read this, to review it, to look at it, I'm sure everything's fine and dandy. Because we just got this today, and this, you've received this prior, so.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. I guess my question would be, may I address?
You may.
Okay, Commissioner Spikers, this question about you explaining to us, what is it that you are, that there's some pressure that you have, knowing about the audit that you.
Well, that's why we're doing, the reason why we're doing affiliation is the way we're doing things right now will never work in the long run. And we'll continue to depreciate our assets. And at some point, even this year and last year, we've been taking money out of our cash and depleting our cash. Eventually, it will go down to a point where if we didn't affiliate or we didn't sell a hospital, or we didn't lease, or we didn't do something with it to expand operations, to be able to get the outpatient services available for the community, it just couldn't work. When we get 98% on our contract
cost
from
based
Medicare.
reimbursement is 99%
and
of
you-
every
you-
service now.
Although it's a really good deal for, if we were an overlay, for instance, they could probably make $1 million a year on all their patients that they can put into a swing bait program right off the bat. That's the positive thing about why they want us. But in answer to your question, these figures are correct. I mean, 126% debt to capitalization.
I
That's
was
because
gonna
we've
ask
got a
that.
new hospital. Total margin, minus 2%, 1.9. You can't keep doing that. And even though we have a lot of cash, because we've depreciated for the last 4 years, our hospital, the new hospital, we've been able to accumulate cash. We are at a point where it's kind of leveling off as to how much cash we actually have, and it will be, if you look year to year, we're starting to use, we're going to start using some of the cash. Eventually, I'm not saying next year or the year after, I'm saying 5, 10 years down the line, we could have an issue because our reimbursement rate will be as high, and we would probably end up in a really difficult situation if we were not able to diversify our services and provide better outpatient services. And that's the only, our old hospital could never do that. It was not set up for it. And you could never, I mean, it just was too old and outdated to be able to bring standard care services to the community in a hospital such as that building. And this was the only way to be able to do that. And I hope that we do end up getting a good deal on the work, at least for the community. You know, the transaction process, I'll say that. But hopefully that did.
But my
answer.
question also is on the operating margin, which is higher than both Washington and National. And then the age of plan, we're a new, newer, much newer hospitals, I don't know. But, I know you tried to explain it earlier about the
Well,
percentage.
Well, I
so-
can tell you what, we're at minus 1.9% in 2 years. We can refinance one of the loans and save anywhere from $200,000 to $500,000 a year right there. In 6 years, I've overlaid was to purchase the hospital. All of a sudden, our debt to capitalization would go away. They would be the owners of the hospital. We would have potentially a pretty valuable piece of property across the street that might, by that time, be incorporated into the city of Issaquah and probably triple the value of the price.
Snoqualmie.
Or, sorry.
Snoqualmie. Either that or the state for a highway.
Snoqualmie. And, so there's a lot of positive things. But you have to have foresight. And if you don't have foresight, you dwell on, what is, you're never going to see it. So I've had some foresight. I think we're doing pretty well. And not as good as I wanted it, but I think we have the potential to get out of this drain and get on high ground and be able to really, really provide better and more diversified services to our community, which is what we are all about.
Okay, thanks, Jen. Do you have any questions or anything?
I don't right now.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure you had an opportunity. Thank you. Thank everybody else. We all asked our questions. Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it every time.
Sir, can I make a comment?
Yes, you may.
Matt said clean audit, complimented the staff. That's Jim Baldwin. If you see Jim doing a great job, tell the staff, they do a great job. So, it makes my job easy. Yeah.
He's always on it.
He is.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
I'm a escort man.
Yes, thank you,
All right.
Steve.
So it doesn't get lost.
Okay, guess what's up next? The Finance Committee.
Okay, I'm on.
You're on.
Thank you.
Hi, Chris.
If I may go ahead. We've been below our predicted budget for several months now, I think. And it seems, you know, I keep asking these questions, so are we done with our main purchases that come up on a once a year basis, but they're in the first part of the year? We think we are. We weren't that far off of our budget prediction of a loss of 15,000. For those of you who don't understand, certain months that have like 30 days, or even February is just a horrendous month, we don't have as many patient days, okay? So we have the vulnerability to lose money on those months. So the 30-day, the 28-day, we budgeted that we will be losing in those months. The days that are 31 days, we should do pretty well. But however, February carried over to March because we were shut down 8 days.
And weather this year.
The weather.
Weather caused some problem for the clinics. And
So that cannot be predicted, but, so we traditionally had a pretty good month in March, usually we would not. So we're below budget. There's a couple of reasons why we were. We had a new HR prescription service reference check tool, $7,000. We paid $8,000 to East Campus for a water management fee. There was, and I think if you look at some of the, I think there's some reasons on the financial minutes, finance minutes, if I can find it, for some of the other, here we go. This is pretty good. We're pretty transparent when I want this, the reasons for any shortfalls in, or variances, I think, in our budget. And I always want to ask about those at the finance meeting. And some of the reasons, we have some staff not taking PTO, health reimbursement account expenses are well planned for the month. Some of this stuff is beyond, I don't even know how.
Can't predict it.
Yeah, I just don't know. This too is a seasonal variance, it is expected to finish the year at budget in benefits expense. So I'm keeping my eye on it. We'll see. I hope that, you know, things continue to get a little bit better here in the short future. Our unrestricted cash, this is crazy. You think, oh, you're below budget, but our cash increases. Well, that's probably because we're collecting more money in accounts receivable that come from last month. So we collected more money in the following month, which helped that. With bond covenants, we're well above what we have to worry about. The required is 1.2. And we're at 1.55 compliance. And we have to keep reserve funds of 3.675 million change. And days on cash in hand, we have to have at least 60. We were in the 90s, we're down about 85. But I suspect by the end of the year, we'll be towards 100 again.
I think we'll probably be closer, because we had made a big payment to Medicare. We were have it, but that's cash. So I think we'll probably be in the 80 range or so by the end of the year. As we go up.
No, that should be about the same after, because we've got a payment of about 1.3.
1.8.
1.8 million.
So
So the 1.8 million is owed not because we predict so much what our rate is, and if our expenses and the cost of doing the procedures are less than what Medicare has authorized payment for, we have to pay them back. So, and we do quarterly checks on it. And this year, I was kind of, we thought, well, we'll just keep the money interest-free, and all that, but, yeah, let's be a little bit. So what we've done is we've actually put about $50,000 more per month in contractual reserves. So that's about $600,000, which is about what we lost last year.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's what we're doing, to get a more accurate day-by-day, not day-by-day, at least month-by-month.
Quarter by quarter,
Yeah.
we have a quarterly test there in the last report.
So that's what we're doing to keep things in check, to be more honest about our budget and be more transparent, I guess, about what our real costs and our reimbursement rate is, contractual rate. So, I don't know what else to say about what we're talking about. If there's any questions, we might have to take them.
Somebody have any more questions for Commissioner Spikers? Then we will move on to
Well, I have one thing. I make a motion to approve the cash disbursements and warrants of $3,008,155.73. This is composed payroll warrants, clinic payroll, auto deposits, hospital and clinic payroll tax, hospital and clinic retirement, 457, 458, 453B match plans, as well as accounts payable warrants.
I'll second that. Is there any further discussion?
Call for a roll call vote.
That's carried, take it to a vote.
President Norris,
Yes.
Vice President Herron,
Yes?
Secretary Spikers,
Yes.
Commissioner Pollard,
No?
and Commissioner Carter.
Yes.
And does that pass?
It passes, it passes. Alrighty, so next on the agenda, we have medical committee. And we have medical committee open and QI steering committee open, and I should have done this at the very front of the meeting. Jen, do you want to be on, we have those two committees, be on one or both? What would you like to do?
You might want to look at the calendar, the times.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about that.
If you look at this calendar, you'll see when they meet.
Okay.
Yep, that'll help.
Right. Do you need an answer right now in this format, or can I email you, or?
Well, if you'd like to do that, you and I can talk later, and you can, yeah. I think
Yeah, let's do that, if that's okay
Yeah.
with the
Yeah,
body.
we can do appointment.
Cool, thanks.
All righty, you're welcome. All right, so next on the agenda is medical committee. Commissioner Herron.
Very short one. Okay. The hospital did some preparatory response to measles cases in Issaquah, reviewed as well as occupational health reforms for patient care staff. There was two cases in Issaquah. At least that's all that we know of. Okay, and on the lab side, Sun Medical Laboratory Services collaboration continues on track to plan late June launch. Okay, pharmacy and infection side, the Century 7, this is the infection and treatment monitoring application implementation. The work is ongoing. Dr. Rick Cobb covered sleep medicine. The service will set to launch July 12th. And entering planned assessment period regarding continuation of co-location at Friends of Youth in North Bend. I guess we've been there and the present there for the last 6 months, and so we're entering that period of planned assessment with Friends of Youth. And I think that's all we have for the medical committee.
Are there any questions for Commissioner Herron? Hearing none, we will move on. And that puts me and Emma at Facilities Committee. Facilities Committee met on June 3rd at 8:30 in the morning. One of the discussion items was the day room temperature, and Scott indicated that the day room was currently within acceptable parameters. The facility department staff will continue to monitor the day room temperature to see if further adjustments in the hospital HVAC system is required. The interior temperature may vary on the outside temperature changes as we approach summer, so they're going to continue to watch that. We still, and you heard me refer to it today, the construction punch list. We never got an occupancy permit really for the hospital. So Scott has been following up on that and making sure that that happened. Am I right about that, Steve?
Yeah, we don't have our permanent occupancy permit. We are working with developer of the property, Henry Royal, and with the city's contractor to get what are called as-built plans to the city, which is the big issue. There are some other punch list items that we need to do to get done in the next 60 days.
Has Roy cooperating with us?
Yes, they are.
They are.
You know, it's good because they speak this foreign language called as-built, so they're working with the city's contractor. And they realize they're contractually obligated to get those to us.
We have to get it all done by then, before the affiliation process.
Yeah, oh yeah, I hope to get it done by the end of July.
Because we're requiring a walkthrough, so we hope to.
Yeah,
make sure that
no step there, it's not really our
Right.
problem.
Okay.
So we will do that.
That's my comment.
Clinical room, that clinic procedure room, all work in the clinic procedure room has been completed. Reflective signage update. Work on the signage on the parkway has been completed. The item will be removed from the committee's agenda. Now, one of the problems with that was the light. My husband made a big mistake because if it blinded somebody, which it was,
Yeah.
it was a liability.
Yeah.
And Scott got right on it. All facility work, related work has been completed for the opening of the sleep lab. We're going to be starting that. Facilities related work involving installation of some furniture and fixtures and supporting the testing. The staff meeting with King County Search and Rescue to get updated on the work that they are having done at the site that they lease across right here on the East Campus. We will work to discuss on any risk management related issues regarding this work as well. Are there any questions for facilities
Just
committee?
one of, also comment, was $5,000 for the sleep lab. Startup costs and ROI is almost immediate on it, so,
There's no-
That's a good thing.
yeah.
Yeah. Just an update, and also on our community gathering. So the Snoqualmie Rotaries do meet here every Thursday. However, because we were talking about their sign that's still at the club, they do meet there for their breakfast, the other 3 Thursdays. Yeah, so I don't think that they will give us that little particular update. Just for updates, so I want to make sure. I checked with them just so, no, we still, but yes, we are at your hospital on the 3rd Thursday. Thank you.
I don't have anything under old business. New business discussion on medical committee and colleague steering committee on appointment. Jen, do you know?
She's going to get back to
To
you.
be
Still-
continued.
Okay.
Discussion.
I didn't write that down. I
We're
should have.
gonna give you 3 minutes.
I need another 45 seconds.
45 seconds.
Okay.
You're going to do good of the board.
Yeah. Is there any other old business? Okay, then we're on to, we're already past that. Public comment, do we have any public comment? I'll make a comment, it's nice to have you here. It really is.
Absolutely.
Have you out and about.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Very
coming.
good to see you.
We don't have any action items. So, let's see, I guess that's it. Good of the order, Commissioner comment. Do we have any good of the order that anybody wants to? And this is each commissioner shall have 1 comment, period, limited to 3 minutes. I'd like to keep it shorter if we could, but
I'll start, Madam Chair. And this is a comment and also a clarification to our legal counsel on when there is a presenter And at the end of his presentation, he asked questions, if we have any questions. Is it, because we're trying to do due diligence in our protocol, in our process, do we always address, before we ask the question, the chair, or do we just go directly to the presenter?
It'd be appropriate to interact directly with the presenter because you're not asking to obtain the floor for a
Okay.
motion and you're not involved in debate. And that's when you need to be recognized by the chair as, I want to make a motion or I want to respond to the debate. I want to be heard as to the motion in favor or opposed.
Good
So I think,
clarification.
yeah, I think it'd be fairly appropriate. If for some reason it becomes really raucous and everybody's interrupting everybody, then the chair could say, all right, I'll take control, please address your comments to the chair. But I haven't seen that occur with you.
Maybe, just one more question.
Sure.
Any other comments or, yes, Jen?
Yes, tell me if this is out of order, I'm sorry, I might have,
You're out of
maybe
order.
perhaps not yet. Perhaps I should have put it under a new business, but we ran through it so fast. The needs assessment, I've heard it come up several times, I hear it's overdue. Is that overseen by a committee? Is that just done by the staff of the hospital? What's the next step?
Would you like to address that, Dr. Woodcock? The needs?
Sure, so the community needs assessment is something the IRS put into play a number of years ago. Access Hospitals just recently came under that requirement. And so our time for doing that, is time to do it. And so trying to identify the right time, we're hoping that affiliation would be deeper along than it is now because then it's shared expense. And still that opportunity, looking for that opportunity because it has a certain expense associated with it.
Okay, thank you.
So we've been operating off of the one we had done just a couple of years ago.
That's a very good question. Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, then, and not hearing from the community, I guess we need to make note, affiliation work study, Thursday, July 11th, 2019, 4:30 to 6 o'clock. And if the board president doesn't get there, I don't know what we're gonna do. She needs to be on time. There's a late, regular meeting is Thursday, July 11th, 2019, 6:30 north-south. And then the work study is in June. Will be, July work study will be July 31st, 2019. We schedule from July 24th. That's on the bottom, so you might want to take note to the work study. And everybody, I hope we see each other at Chelan. Do I make a motion to adjourn? Is there any discussion? Hearing none, let's go to a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay.